Welcome back to Bad News Radio. Here are the headlines for today. The virus known as COVID-19 has been spreading rapidly over the last couple weeks, infecting people close to each and every one of us. Global warming is slowly killing us all because of greedy corporate companies and governments that want to gain as much economic gain at the cost of our own futures. You are going to die alone. But there is a way to escape all the pressures and fears of this reality. There's no such thing as a pandemic. There's no such thing as global warming. It's just you and your own reality that you build for yourself. Welcome to the simulation.
Simulation Theory is the 8th album of British alternative rock band Muse, released on the 9th of November 2018. The title of the album refers to the simulation hypothesis, about the world being a simulation, and explores that aspect by having their most cinematic album yet. But even with all of its cinematic features, the story of Simulation Theory can be quite confusing. So today I've taken it on myself to try and find out what the true story of Simulation Theory is. I've compiled lyrics from the album alongside the music videos that were released to promote the album itself, and the visuals and performances during the Simulation Theory World Tour in 2019, alongside the Simulation Theory movie that was released in 2020. With all this information, we'll try to find out what truly is the story of Simulation Theory. Part 1. The album and music videos. So, what's there really to take away from the album itself? Well, clearly it's a story about someone trying to escape a simulation he's lived in all his life, and the experiences and emotions he feels along the way of accomplishing his goal, to escape the simulation. He describes how it felt when he found out that the world is a simulation and algorithm, and the effects it has on him on the dark side and pressure, his fight against spreading of misinformation and propaganda and Break It To Me, and he expresses his motivation to get back up and continue this fight even though it may seem bleak in Get Up and Fight and Dig Down. But saying what really happens at the end of the album is hard to say, because this isn't a concept album like Drones before it, as it had a story told through its songs only, but the story that is told is about the fight to break out of the simulation. If the protagonist actually succeeds doing this is impossible to tell. One could argue that the character repeats their wrong at the end of the void and it slowly fades away, could mean that he repeats this sort of mantra as he breaks out of the simulation. But you can also argue that this is his way to accept his defeat, that he won't make it out and that he slowly drifts away in space, never to be heard from again. But I'll let you draw your own conclusions on that. Now, when talking about the music videos, I'll be talking about the videos released alongside the album. These are the following: Dig Down, Fall Contagion, Something Human, The Dark Side, Pressure, Algorithm, and Break It To Me. I won't be talking about the Blockades music videos, this is just a compilation of previous music videos with just a couple of bike tricks as original content. But before we start analyzing the videos, we must make sense of what order they take place. And I've seen a large discussion on social media about the chronological order of the album. It's almost impossible to pick a fully chronological order for this album, so I'll just pick the order that I feel works best to tell this story. And with that out of the way, we'll be starting off with Pressure. Now, if you haven't seen the music video for Pressure, click off this video right now and watch and then come back. It's an absolutely amazing music video filled with Easter eggs, references, and so much more to previous 80s and 90s movies. So check it out right now if you haven't, it's personally one of my absolute favorite music videos. But assuming you have seen it, let's get into it. Now, starting off, we have a flash forward which we'll talk a bit more about later, but it's a flash forward to just before the events of Something Human. But after that, we get introduced to our protagonist of this music video. We'll call him Bike Boy because he is a boy with a bike. Peak of creativity here at Fnaski Talks. Now, there are many more characters introduced before the song even starts, almost too many to count, but I'll list the important ones here. First up, there's Principal Terry Crews, a legendary actor known for his role in Old Spice commercial, Idiocracy, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Old Spice body spray will make you feel so powerful to blow your mind right in front of your face! Goodbye. Oh no!
Then the band is introduced, consisting of Matt Bellamy singing and playing guitar, Chris Wolstenholme on the contrabass, and Dominic Howard on the drums. Also, pay attention that the banner behind the band where it says, "Make believe in yourself." Now, the meaning of the phrase "make believe" is that it's something fictional, or even simulated, already alluding to the idea that this is taking place in a simulation. After the chorus, previously mentioned bike boy notices a bike girl watching him as they do some epic tricks, so he goes up to her and they bike through the hallways to try and make out in an empty classroom. But then, Bike Boy accidentally knocks over a soda can on a computer, which sends out a laser ray onto the class's hamster, which turns into a gremlin-like monster. I'll just call these gremlins from now on, since that's clearly the inspiration. Now, if you take a look at the soda that he knocks over, the brand is called Propaganda, referring back to the track After Pressure on the album. But it can also refer to that propaganda and fake news can be damaging and have dire consequences. Then, the gremlins run through the halls, infecting a janitor along the way. This will be important later on for Break It To Me, so keep that in mind. And then the gremlins attack the students in the gym hall. Terry Crews then decides to go fuck these creatures, gets a laser gun and fucking shoots all the gremlins. But it's too late, since the students who've been bitten have already been infecting, leaving the band, the bikers and Terry Crews all alone to fight the horde of zombified students approaching them. The transmission then cuts to a news report, where we'll see an attempted interview with a boy. We'll call this boy Interview Boy. That gets cut off by a man in a hazmat suit stopping the broadcast. Now, what seems to be important throughout the video is that Matt seems to be glitching a little bit, with his hand seemingly disappearing and his glasses reflecting a retro-like grid at the end of the video, maybe referring to that this isn't his actual simulation. But also, these could just be references to Back to the Future they decided to throw in there because of the heavy amounts of other references to 80s movies throughout the video. Next up is Break It To Me, which plays out at the same time as Pressure. It revolves around a man who seemingly turned into a werewolf as he dances around the hallway of the school. What context this has to the actual events of Pressure isn't fully sure, as he isn't wearing the same clothes as the janitor we saw being bitten by a gremlin in Pressure, so this could be the simulation breaking and causing more people to turn into monsters. Also, there's a poster in the background where the janitor is bitten, which can also be seen in the background of this video. But if you want to think that these characters are the same or not, is up to your own interpretation. Either way, he tries to escape the building by breaking open some doors that seem to be locked, all whilst dealing with what seems to be a transition from human to werewolf. In the end, we see a bunch of students running towards the exit, most likely after the events of Pressure, and the werewolf tries to follow them but collapses just in front of the exit. Thought Contagion's music video starts with a reference to Dig Down, which already messes up the chronological order of everything. Instead, we are introduced to two characters. Now, you may recognize one of their faces, since one of them is the aforementioned Interview Boy from Pressure. And for simplicity's sake, the girl will just be called Zombie Girl. But after this, we seem to be introduced to a world that is in chaos. There are people in hazmat suits that seem to be checking everyone for a virus. And Zombie Girl shows Interview Boy a cassette labeled Emotionality Rush. This is an anagram to Simulation Theory as an early hint to the album before its announcement, since Thought Contagion was its second single. But this also connects up with the Simulation Theory movie, so we'll get back to that later. Now back to the video, the girl turns out to be a zombie, big shock after I gave her that name, but she ends up biting Interview Boy. This turns into the idea of the phrase thought contagion, which means that people's thoughts and opinions can almost infect other people, regardless if they're true or not. And in the video, they illustrate this by having it actually be an infection rather than a metaphorical conviction. Eventually, it turns out that everyone around him seems to have been infected, and Interview Boy ends up getting a game over screen on an arcade machine with Thought Contagion on it. But then we can see Matt Bellamy pull up in a car next to the arcade machine, having abnormally much hair on his arms and having the full moon reflect into his glasses, which connects up with the next music video, Something Human. Something Human is about the feeling of being far away from home and been touring for so long in the context of the band, but also that you've gone too far that you see no way back anymore. In screenwriting, this is called the point of no return, where the character realizes there's no way to go back to how his life used to be. This usually happens at the end of the second act, meaning that there's a big conflict coming up and that it needs something human to get through it all. The video takes place both after Thought Contagion and Pressure, since the foreshadowing of the VR headset being put on in Pressure took place shortly before this video. as it starts with him taking off the very headset he put on and putting a VHS tape called Simulation Theory into a retrograde case. Now, Retrograde is one of the brands that exist in the Simulation Theory universe, and it's basically the equivalent of Blockbusters back in the 80s. It's a video rental store, basically. Now, before we go any further, I need to mention the road sign at the very start of this video, because it states that the city he has been living in had a population of 200 million, but it's been written over and says that it's been fully infected by some sort of virus. But the question is, if it's the same virus as in Thought Contagion, or if it's a simulation within a simulation. We'll get back to this once we draw conclusions. But after this, Matt leaves in his car and eventually gets chased by Dom and Chris, who have become cops now. Eventually, the two cars are driving straight at each other until Matt flicks a switch in his car and enters what seems to be the dark side. We'll get back to this world later, but basically he warps and then arrives at the Retrograde store where he returns his tape. But then, when the full moon comes out, he turns into a werewolf, infects both Dom and Chris, and escapes with the car, entering the dark side again, leaving the car's license plate doing so. The dark side is a sort of world between the simulation and reality, a sort of simulation that its inhabitants are not supposed to see. So when Matt flicks the so-called warp drive switch in his car, he warps between the dark side and various simulations. I'll explore more about the dark side once we talk about the movie itself, but for now, just imagine it's a place between realities, but it's not the reality itself. But in the song The Dark Side, it follows how Matt tries to escape the dangers of the dark side, including massive robotic creatures that try and stop him. But as it's mentioned in the song's lyrics, he isn't looking back and he's only continuing. Which in this case means he must keep driving, no matter if it's realizing you've lived in darkness all your life, or driving away from the change coming out of the ground, or through the brains of a giant robot. By the end of the music video, Matt hits the switch again and enters another simulation, and with that leaves the dark side behind him. Dig Down was the first single and therefore the first music video of the album, and therefore it's not really connected to the rest of the story of the music video, since it more rather tells its own story. The lyrics are about finding the power within you to fight on, that even when things seem bleak, you just need to find that hidden strength within you to win. The video opens with some screens showing an advert for an augmented flex, which is a sort of endoskeleton for humans, referring to the idea of leaving your body behind. But the ad gets cut off by Matt Bellamy appearing and singing the song on the screen shown throughout the song. He's wearing a blue suit, so we're gonna call this version of Matt Blue Suit Matt. He'll make more appearances later in Algorithm and a movie later on. The story then follows a woman as she wakes up without her leg. Eventually she finds an artificial leg and uses it to continue further in what seems to be a massive facility where a bunch of masked men seem to want to stop her exploring it or finding a secret. And after a tough battle, she stumbles towards what seems to be a server room with a bunch of screens showing Blue Suit Matt. This room might be important later on, so keep in mind that there's a room at the end of Dig Down. Now, next up is Algorithm, which is all about Principal Terry Cruz's adventure after Pressure. Apparently, he survives the event of Pressure, and he has been theorizing about the events ever since. He's made a wall packed of information that I won't fully get into that much. The song itself is about realizing that you're in a simulation, and that what you thought was real all along turns out to be fake. In the video, we get another glimpse of Terry's secret room that we first saw in Pressure, where he seems to have made a connection with an anonymous man over a computer that confirms his suspicions that the world is indeed a simulation. He then does some research on the gremlins, and with that information manages to make a portal to the dark side. He enters the dark side on his motorcycle, and once again, he's trying to be stopped just as Matt before him. But Terry keeps driving just as Matt until he reaches a massive staircase surrounded by the same giant robots from Matt's drive through the dark side. These robots will be very important later on in the movie, so remember the big robots. At the top of the stairs, Terry encounters an arcade machine. On this arcade machine, we once again see Blue Suit Matt from the Dig Down video, seemingly having entered this screen as well. But then Terry unplugs the arcade machine and the simulation, or in this case the dark side, seems to be breaking around him, ending with him stepping out of a bright white light. Part 2. The movie. Now, Simulation Theory is very different to Muse's previous albums and many other albums overall, since they actually made a movie about it. Done by the same director as the music videos, Lance Drake, the Simulation Theory movie was released in August of 2020 as a mixed cinematic and concert film. Of course, I need to add a spoiler alert here in case you haven't seen the movie yet. I know there are people still having issues with seeing it because it isn't available in every country digitally yet, and also I can't show too much of the movie itself because of copyright reasons. But for those who've already seen the movie or don't care about spoilers, here we go. The movie starts with a news report about some bright lights in the sky above London, as we then start following a group of hazmat men who enter the O2 Arena, where the concert was originally recorded. But soon we see one of the hazmat men, who we later on know to be called Murph, touch the Simulation Theory arcade machine that appears on the stage, which drives him insane, being able to see a simulation in which the concert is taking place. But then we're treated to a very important scene, where we can see Matt's car standing in the dark side as a light beam transports Matt out of the dark side and onto the simulation, which is the concert. The hazmat man, also known as Murph, eventually manages to wake up out of the simulation, but instead gets infected by a zombie that has appeared on the stage. To try and stop his infection, the hazmat men find help by opening a gateway for a mysterious woman. In the subtitles, she's actually just called a woman, but I'll call her the NPC after she describes herself as an NPC made by the mainframe. She explains that there's been a tear in the simulation which has created the virus, and she also explains that the error causing this issue is the men in the hazmat suits, most likely meaning Murph that has touched the arcade machine and therefore traveled into another dimension. The NPC also explains that the mainframe is creating a malicious universal reality formatter, also known as MURF, or Murph. And then we see that the Murph robots are identical to the giant robots we saw in the dark side, and that we also get to know that they're truly called the Truth Slayers, and their job is to format the simulation, basically meaning deleting everything inside it to fix the corruptions and reset it. We eventually see the virus spreading and the NPC taking over the members of the media to tell the people that the virus is all fake and there's nothing to worry about, there is nothing to fear, ending up with the people rioting against it because they know it is all fake and it's a simulation. But eventually, we switch perspectives to Matt as he tries to stop Murph, or the Truth Slayer, from formatting the simulation by managing to enter the mainframe. The NPC then also explains during the prelude to Starlight that Matt is trying to defeat the mainframe by leveling up, meaning he goes from simulation to try and stop them from being destroyed. We eventually see him get the Power Glove, a weapon strong enough to destroy a Murph robot. And then, by the end of Algorithm, we see Matt unplug the Simulation Theory arcade machine, just like Terry Crews did in the music video for Algorithm. Just after this, the simulation seems to break down as the NPC leaves and Murph, the hazmat man who turned into a werewolf, not the robot, ends up dying. And this starts the final battle during the metal medley between Matt and Murph. He manages to defeat Murph by absorbing his power and using it to light up the sky, freeing the simulation from the grips of the mainframe. But the NPC reminds Matt that he might have freed one simulation, but there are many more simulations left to be freed to defeat the mainframe as he transports himself into the next dimension as the movie turns to black. In the credits, we can see a furious news reporter talking about the simulation and the corruption, leading us to wake up from their grip. So that's the basic plot of the entire movie, summed up quite quickly, but we have to mention some details that aren't exactly important to the plot of the movie itself, but tell a lot about the universal simulation theory. First of all, we need to talk about Emotionality Rush. It was shown as a cassette tape in the music video of Thought Contagion, but in the ad just before Madness in the movie, we can learn a bit more about Emotionality Rush. Apparently it's a sort of virtual reality dating application where we can see Interview Boy put on a virtual reality headset. But what's more important is that throughout the broadcast we see Blue Suit Matt trying to interrupt the commercial. And another thing, what about the idea of simulations within simulations? As the NPC mentioned before Starlight, you have to level up to defeat the mainframe, going from simulation to eventually find the highest power. But this means that there might be different dark sides. And as we saw before, the dark side Terry traveled through in Algorithm does seem quite different to the dark side Matt escaped from in the song The Dark Side. That's a lot of dark sides in one sentence. And what about the dark side in the movie? Is that the same one that Matt travels through in the music video? Well, all that and more will come up now as we're gonna talk about my conclusions for all the information we've gathered. Part 3. The conclusion. Now, I don't want to draw too many conclusions, but we can at least try connect some dots and come up with some theories. And before I go into anything, I must mention that I do not know everything about the simulation theory universe. There might be some details I've missed during the concerts, or maybe some extra details in the movie box set that was released last winter that I don't own. For an example, as I've understood it, the Marvel comic included in the box set just repeats the same story as in the movie, but maybe it does contain some extra details I might have missed. But if you have some more information that I feel like I maybe didn't pick up in this video, feel free to comment it down below. But first, let's try and make sense of some of this information we've gotten. So, the story we know so far is about a man trying to escape a simulation in the album, the stories around Matt and Terry in the music videos, and the overarching story about Murph in the movie. Now, of course, there are many dots we can draw between these lines with recurring characters and such. Now, there are many different kinds of people in the story. There are the common people who we see in the roles such as Interview Boy in Thought Contagion, the biker's impression, and the people rioting in the movie. Then there's the infected, but what sort of infection people get is unsure. Some people turn into zombies, but others turn into werewolves. The zombies in the movies have LED faces with 2 X's on them, and in the music videos, they're characterized by having long nails and fangs. The werewolves have a lot of hair on them and they usually change the face when it's full moon. This infection starts in different ways, but usually because of an error in the simulation. In the movie, it's because Murph touches the arcade machine and enters the simulation of the concert, and in Pressure, it's most likely the laser hitting the hamster turning it into a gremlin. But one could also argue that the cause of the simulation's error is Matt, because he doesn't seem to be really from that reality, because his hands seem to glitch and you can see the grit of the dark side in his glasses. So it could mean that Matt is entering the dimension could cause the things to go bad in Pressure. Some other people of note are the men in hazmat suits, which are people from the simulation itself trying to stop the virus. One of those characters is Human Murph before he gets infected, and the other hazmat men that appear throughout the movie, the music video of Pressure, and Thought Contagion. Then there's the fumigators, as I like to call them. They're the women that appear in propaganda with the smoke guns, and their job is to kill the infected. Then there's the NPCs, which we see in the performance of Dig Down in the movie, and as the NPC in the movie. They're created by the mainframe as a sort of human way to communicate with the inhabitants of the simulation. And then the question is, what is the mainframe? Well, it's a server that hosts all simulations and makes sure that no errors occur. But this is where we get into theories, so please don't take all of this for granted I'm saying right now. This is just my personal theory for what this all might mean. So let's go back to that server room at the end of Dig Down, because that does look quite a lot like a mainframe, doesn't it? That would mean that whatever is taking place in Dig Down is actually taking place in the real world. So where's this facility then that we see in Dig Down? Well, I have another theory about that, because at the top of the artwork of the album, we can see a massive spaceship. But what even is this spaceship if not where Dig Down takes place and where the mainframe is located? The spaceship is shown at the performance of Supermassive Black Hole, and the stage of the world tour is designed to look like a spaceship. But more than that, we have very little information about this spaceship. Everything else in the album artwork seems to be connected to the music video. The band members, the cars, the werewolves, the zombies, and much more are all visible, but yet we've never seen anything about the spaceship. Unless Dig Down does take place on that spaceship. And all of that connects up with Blue Suit Matt, which we've seen throughout the videos and the backgrounds and trying to interrupt broadcasts in various simulations. My theory is that Blue Suit Matt has been able to find a way to broadcast themselves onto all realities and has been able to convince the women in Dig Down to go after the mainframe in the reality to finally defeat it of the outside instead of from the inside. So, what's my personal conclusion to what I think happened? Well, there's no ending to the story, but it starts with Matt realizing the world is a simulation and breaking out of his own simulation in the album itself. He then relives his experience with the songs throughout the music video and the movie. But what its connection is between the music videos and the movie is still unsure. Because in the videos, Matt travels from an infected city and looks back at the events of Pressure, drives away from the retrograde store to return his VHS tape of Simulation Theory and then escapes into the dark side. But in the movie, he does drive back to the retrograde store, but instead of returning it, he puts it in to re-enter the simulation to fight Murph. So, is this an alternate ending or maybe a parallel universe version of him? And are the events of Pressure, Fall Contagion, Break It To Me, and Algorithm taking place in a simulation within a simulation? Because Matt does use the same VHS tape to look back at Pressure as he did when he went into the simulation to fight Murph. My theory is that the chronological order first is the album, then the music videos of Pressure, Break It To Me, Fall Contagion, and then Matt traveling to the simulation above that one where Something Human takes place and where he also is a werewolf. Then he escapes into the dark side where we see him later on start in the movie as he lives through a similar story and ends up battling Murph. After the battle, we can look at the music video for Behold the Glove. It's a solo act from Matt Bellamy with the music video seemingly taking place in the desert with the ruins of Murph around him as he finds the power glove again and rides off on a horse.
So this is editing me here. I completely forgot about the simulation theory theme. So I'm sorry about that, but it's basically just Matt returning the power glove to the simulation, I guess. I didn't really analyze that much, so feel free to come with your own ideas about that one. Alright, back to the video.
After this, Matt becomes Blue Suit Matt, manages to encourage Terry to escape the algorithm through his computer, and convinces the woman in Dig Down to destroy the mainframe from the outside. But this wasn't really an easy theory to come up with, since it still leaves a ton of plot holes. How does Blue Suit Matt travel back in time to show up during the movie? How does he communicate with someone outside of the mainframe? But with the information we have currently, this is the best idea I could come up with. Now, I'm sure my story definitely has some flaws, and it's not the one originally envisioned by Lance Drake, the director of the music videos and the movie. But without any clear answers, all we can do is hope that one day the truth comes out about what simulation theory really is about. I doubt we'll get any more lore about the simulation theory era of Muse, since Muse started writing their 9th album as of writing this video. But always remember, this is after all just an album. After the connected story of Drones, the album before Simulation Theory, I bet many of us felt the need to connect every dot in the story again. But sometimes that may not be necessary. Just because I think the story should go one way, doesn't mean that you have to think that too. I'd love to hear your own conclusions, and after all, music is all about your own interpretation. It's their work, but just as any art piece, you can interpret it as you want. Thank you all very much for watching. Have a good day.